Cheers. Hi everyone, I'm Seth, this is Abby. Quick run through of who we are. Ignore all the busy stuff at the top. When I'm not doing technical stuff, family DIY, inventing my own board game, and watching rugby any chance I get. Abby?
Hi, I'm Abby. So I'm a recent graduate from Leeds University doing forensics computing and cybersecurity. My current role at the moment is a cyber threat hunter, and this is my first job since coming out of uni. So between finishing uni and starting my job, I managed to travel around Southeast Asia to make the most of my time off. So you're welcome to catch me later if you want any more information about me.
Same for me as well. Okay, so start off. How many people here know about the attack matrix and MITRE? One or two. Excellent, because I don't want to go into too much of it. Really high level, MITRE is a not-for-profit organisation, the first to have the .org TLD. They invented the CVE database for vulnerability and patch management and all of that. That became a common language for all the vulnerability managers and IT teams out there to understand which vulnerabilities they had to look at. What they've done is exactly the same, but for TTPs, for tools, techniques and processes of the attack groups. Why did I choose ATT&CK to set up a dedicated threat hunting service? I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's 200 plus techniques created by a load of really good analysts out there who all of the information is based on publicly available information. All the references are on the ATT&CK framework. So yeah, didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Create loads and loads of 278 or whatever John's created. They're already there, use them. It's also about having that common language. So as a technician, I might be looking hunting on a technique. I might be a checkpoint, a Cisco technician, and understand how to look for that in Cisco and Checkpoint. Somebody else within the team might be the Juniper or Palo Alto. They can interpret the technique and then translate it to the language of their tools and technologies. Obviously, different languages as well, if it's English, Chinese, German, or whatever. And it's also there to help me identify the gaps in our defences. So if we're looking at as many of the techniques as possible, each of those techniques relies on a data source. Those data sources are fed by your security controls, your AV, your EDR, your endpoint detect and response tools, your proxies. All of those feed into the data sources, and those give you the detection capabilities against each of the techniques. If you find you haven't got a data source, you've got a gap in your detection capabilities and possibly your prevention capabilities as well. So you need to pass that on to your security engineering and your security architecture teams. They can take those gaps, raise them to the business, give them what the risk is to the business of having that gap in your defences, and hopefully either close it down or accept the risk. So that's why I chose MITRE ATTCK framework to set up the dedicated service. Just quickly, the threat hunting service is there. John has already mentioned it in his talk earlier. It's that continuous improvement cycle. It's not just standing still. It's ensuring your business is moving forward all the time and looking for new stuff. We have a dedicated SOC. They do the known stuff and the known unknown. We look for the unknown. It is unknown only to our business. It's not unknown necessarily across the internet. So that's why. Where do you start? So, MITRE ATTCK framework has 200 plus techniques in it. I naively thought, we actually recruited the team, most of them started in July. I thought between July and Christmas, I'd cane all 200 plus techniques, we'd get all of them done. No, not at all. So there are a number of techniques in there that require things like physical forensics, etc. If you're looking at firmware and BIOS and stuff like that, you can't automate that. You can't grab the logs back automatically. You actually have to sit down and do forensic. There are a number of techniques in there that you just can't do in an automated fashion, in a fast fashion. So it wasn't achievable. Then obviously gaining access, so this age-old problem for IT and security, it's getting access to the tools and the data to actually look for the detections, to create detections, look for activity. we still have that problem. We're a global business, so getting access to the data over in one of the international markets, that can be a challenge as well. If we're lucky, in the UK, we can get hold of the data pretty quickly, but if we have to send off, it could take half a day, a week, or even a month to get that data back. So we write the detection, we contact the market, we give them the information, and eventually we get the data back so that we can do some analysis. Then eventually we get access to the tools and the data, and we've got a small bit of malicious activity in a whole load of normal activity. The needle in the haystack, or needle in the needle, as was said earlier, needle in the needle stack. It's trying to find that one piece of malicious activity amongst all of the other suspicious activity that your developers, your IT admins, your other security people, all of them are doing things like PowerShell commands and stuff like that. If they're sending PowerShell up to Amazon and things like that, they're going to be using base 64 to encode it, and that's going to flag on one of our obfuscation techniques. So, yeah, eventually we get there. There are other hurdles, but I'm trying to stick to three things for each slide. So what tooling do we need? So the most important thing is record everything. Record what you do in your incident tracker. This has two benefits. One of them is helping the juniors within the team, or helping other analysts within the team. If you've recorded it once, somebody else can use what you've already done and build on that. So they're not doing the same thing again. You're not duplicating effort. You're only doing it once. Secondly, top tip, and I'll come back to this later, is record any time you have a true positive, an actual cyber instance of malicious activity within your environment. Try and track the technique number in your incident tracker against that security incident. I'll touch on this later, but it helps you prioritize. It helps you start. Attack is very much an endpoint-centric tool. It's all about the endpoint. So having a good EDR tool, Sysmon was mentioned earlier. If you get a chance, search for Microsoft's blog for WEFLs. There's a really good using Power BI and Sysmon to do threat hunting. There's free stuff out there. Obviously, there's all of the commercial stuff, your Carbon Blacks, FireEye, HX, Tanium, Cisco AMP, and plenty of others out there that you can use as well. But most of the techniques are based around activity on your endpoints, your workstations, your laptops, your servers. So having a good EDR tool is key for threat hunting, in my opinion. Lastly, threat hunting seams. So we've actually set up a separate seam for threat hunting. Our Security Operations Centre have the enterprise seam, feeding them in alerts. But that's been tuned for the known and the known unknowns. So that's the stuff that we know about, we know how to deal with. We don't want to be giving them all of the false positive, all of suspicious but not necessarily bad activity, because otherwise they'd be wasting their cycles not actually fixing bad stuff. They'd be there trying to tune stuff out. That's our job as threat hunting, is to tune it down to a state that they can just get straight into the incident and follow the playbook. As I said, we've done it separately. You can do it within your existing seam if you're able to segregate it out or just keep the data to the side. But for us, it was easier to set it up on a separate system. Sorry. So I mentioned prioritization earlier. Where do we start? How do I fix that problem? So top right, technique prevalence. What I said about recording the technique number or numbers within the instant tracker, that then gives me a prevalence of which techniques are being used against my environment. Now, if I haven't got automated response to those techniques, I need to develop those automated responses to them. So I'm going to prioritize any techniques I'm actually seeing used against us. The more they're used, the more likely the higher I'll prioritize them. And then I'm going to deprioritize those techniques I've already looked at in the last 30 days, because I don't want to be looking at the same techniques again and again and again, unless I prioritize them in other ways, obviously. So we've got a scoring mechanism to try and narrow it down. On the left there, data sources. So, mentioned it already. You need to do the mapping against your data sources, against your security tools, to understand which ones you've got and where your gaps are. Now, obviously, you want to prioritise the ones that answer the most techniques. Process monitoring is 149 of the techniques. If you've got process monitoring, probably through an EDR tool, you'll be able to detect some of the activity of those techniques. But obviously, there are others in there from my previous experience. You've got PowerShell that only answers one technique, and I'll cover that a bit more in a bit. You've got email, you've got proxies and DNS records. Although they only answer one technique, they only give you the detection capabilities against one or two techniques. My experience is that I can get a lot of information out of those log sources, out of those data sources, so I would prioritise those above. And finally, threat intelligence. So threat intelligence will pass us various groups that might be likely to attack us or attack the industry. So we'll collate those groups and we'll look at the techniques that those groups are known to have used. Any technique that's been used by multiple groups will get a higher priority than those techniques that are used by only one or two groups. Because again, I want to get as much bang for my buck as possible. I want to get as many techniques that are applicable to my business investigated, because I'm more likely to catch the bad guys and girls when they attack us if they're aimed at us. So threat intel is really useful. Sorry. And those are the core ways. There are some other prioritizations that we do as well, but that then gives us a top 20 that we really focus down on within the business. We look at all of the techniques, but those top 20 are the ones that are most applicable to us and are really important. So moving on, I'll quickly run through our process. Not that quickly. Sorry, should have sped out. Right, well, I'll start at the far end. We've prioritised our technique. We've taken our technique from the ATT&CK framework. We've got all the information out of ATT&CK and how it's used by the different groups. We'll create a detection for it, and we might start with a very wide detection for that technique, and we might then start narrowing it down based on the threat intel we've had and based on the data we have available, etc. Once we've written a detection, we then go and collect the data. As I said, that could be pretty much instantly if we've got it available in an enterprise SIM in the UK market, but as it said, it could take a lot longer if it's an international market. So we get hold of the data eventually. We feed all of that information into our threat hunting scene and we perform analysis. Then we start the analysis tuning model and we go around that circle quite a few times to try and get rid of as many false positives as possible, to get rid of the developers sending encoded commands to AWS, because we know that team, we know that they do that on a daily basis. We should have other techniques and detections in place if their account's compromised. What I'm trying to do is just find this particular technique. So I want to narrow it down so that I get just a true positive alerting out of it. Once we've done that tuning cycle, we chuck it into our dashboards on our scene and we monitor it for a while. We then will pass it off to the red team and get them to run a test against it, and hopefully that should flag in our dashboard and we should see that it's actually working. If it doesn't, then we go back into the tuning cycle and try and fix where we broke it. If we do find something true positive, we'll pass it on to our threat intel team, and they can share it with trusted partners, but they can also then give us additional information. So I think it was Dan was talking about the attack chain. If we find it at one point in the attack chain and we can find the most likely other techniques that those groups would use or that multiple groups would use, we can go and try and look for activity there. We can try and find out how did they get into the environment and what they were trying to get and what they're trying to get after. When we've done all of the tuning we can and we've got it to a really good stage that only fires on a true positive, We pass it over to the SOC. We write the playbook so they can eradicate, contain and recover. Bit hot at the back there. So that was the process. So I mentioned the cyber attack chain, kill chain, Lockheed Martin, all that. This is actually the 12 tactics. So these are column headers in the framework here. They loosely translate to the cyber kill chain. Down at this end, down at here, you've got exfiltration and impact are the two tactics in the framework. Those are the ones that actually have an impact to the business. There is some impact further up the chain, but it's more resource utilisation than actual cost to the business. When the bad guys and girls copy your data, they're stealing your IP. When they're deleting or encrypting your data, they're impacting your productivity. When they're changing your data, changing our customer's account to their account so we pay them instead of our customer, they're costing us money and reputational damage. So we want to stop them. We want to stop them much further up the kill chain. So we want to detect them much further up the kill chain. So our job in threat hunting is to keep pushing the attackers further up the kill chain. It's not just threat hunting. The whole of cyber operations needs to keep pushing them up. So that's our main goal. As I said, I built the team started the team in January 2018, actually recruited by July. I've got 3 juniors and 3 seniors, including myself. Now, what the attack framework has is, as I said, all of that common knowledge built by senior analysts, really good analysts who know their stuff. By using the framework, I'm able to, the juniors are able to not just rely on the seniors in the team to share their experience, but they're able to use all of the information on the attack matrix. So it's a force multiplier. It allows you to have more senior analysts in your team than you actually have. And tunnel vision. So I might be really good at finding PowerShell. I might stop the attackers every time they use PowerShell against me, no matter what PowerShell commands or how they've tried to hide. I always find them when they're using PowerShell. And I'm really good at that, and I really enjoy looking for them when they're using PowerShell. They'll work out that they can't get past me if they use any PowerShell commands. Now, if I just sit there and focus on it, they will pivot past me. They will use another tactic, another technique to escalate their privileges, to move laterally. If I just look at PowerShell all the time, I will miss them. So by using the framework, by looking at what other techniques they could be using against you, you stop tunnel vision. So this is why I believe we have it gives benefit to use the attack framework. And on that note, I will hand over to Abby.
Thank you, Seth. So the following slide is an example of how I have performed a threat hunting investigation using the MITRE ATTCK framework. And I must add that the tools, technologies and groups used throughout this run-through are made up to protect the identities of the innocent. So it starts off by our threat intel team feeding me information with potential groups that could potentially harm our company. So the MITRE ATTCK framework features multiple attack groups. However, for this example, I've used Lazarus Group and Gorgon Group. So when looking at the 2 groups that Threat Intel provided in MITRE ATTCK, it is seen that each group includes a list of techniques that they have potentially used to harm companies. So my job as a threat hunter is to create detections for each of these techniques so that we have the ability to find and contain against them. So for this example, I tried to look at any common techniques situated across both groups, and it turns out there are 10 common techniques. So the next stage is prioritization. So Seth's already mentioned prioritizing techniques. So once narrowing down the top 20 common techniques, I noticed that I personally hadn't visited disabling security tools in the last 30 days. And in addition, I did speak to a few members of the team, and I found out there wasn't a global detection currently in place. So then moving on to picking what attack group to focus on. So as you can see, both groups have used the technique differently. Gorgon Group used task kill command to disable security tools, whereas Lazarus Group disabled them through using NetSH. So I decided to focus on Gorgon Group as I thought I could probably create the detection and it looked quite easy. And in addition, I did have a look around, and we did already have detection in place for Lazarus Group as we monitor SSH. So then moving on to the data sources. So when you click into the technique, I'm able to see what data sources the technique requires. And as a team, we've been able to map out each data source to our existing tools. And this has been great as a new starter, as I'm still getting to know the environment. So it has sped up my hunting process because I know what tool to look at. So for this technique, I knew that we had command line monitoring in place, which will enable me to capture the use of task kill being used. However, it isn't as always easy as it sounds. As I am part of a global team, it is sometimes difficult to retrieve data due to access issues, and these problems I'm still having today. So therefore, I sometimes have to contact international markets or security engineers to help me gain access to this certain data. And it can be a very long process, but again, it's been great for a new starter, as I'm able to get to those people in different teams and even in different countries. So then moving on to creating the detection. As you can see, I have created a PowerShell script that allows me to collect command line information from one endpoint detection and response tool. I can't lie, I did start off with an old script developed by one of our seniors in our team, but I managed to adapt it to alert for this particular technique. So this script will alert me when task kill has been used to disable any of our security tools in our environment. And then I also wrote this detection in another detection and response tool. So as you can see in this tool, I use the query in the console to create alerts. So you may wonder why I've created two different detections and two different tools. So this is just to guarantee a wider coverage across different markets. So then where does all the data go? All the data capture feeds into our threat hunting scheme, where we can tune out any false positives. So when I first wrote the detection, there was a lot of noise, which you can see. And as a team, we are constantly moving techniques in and out of the dashboard as our prioritization changes. So the lower priority hunts sit in secondary dashboards, where we still monitor them individually, but just not as regularly as our top 20. And it should also be noted that these are just top 20 random techniques I've picked. But even our own top 20 techniques can be very noisy at times. So then moving on to tuning the detection, I was able to determine that the 1,500 alerts were all down to 3 privileged accounts used by our team, our IT team. So they have the responsibility of deploying and updating security tools. And as it turns out, security tools can be a pain to uninstall. Therefore, they use Tasker a lot. However, before excluding the 3 privileged accounts from my hunt, I checked, and these accounts are all monitored and controlled through other creating detections that we have in place. So if their account ever did become compromised, we would know about it elsewhere. So then, once the detection is tuned and the alerting is in place, I will pass it on to our red team, who will kindly test if the detection works. So in this case, we just get our red team to run task kill on their machine and kill off one of our security tools. And then if the detection does work, an alert will appear on the dashboard, which you can see there. And this is a very helpful process, as we can actually know whether our detection works or whether we need to go back and tune it again so it comes back with the right information. So then, Seth has already mentioned it is important to record all of this in an incident tracker, even if it is a false positive, so other members of the team know what I've been up to, and then they can maybe use the existing tools or detections to develop it further. So within the security ticket, I would start by referencing the MITRE ATTCK technique I've been working on, and then along with the technique number. And the next step would be to write the potential impact of our company, mention what detection is currently in place, and then any mitigation steps that we may need to take if our company was ever to be affected by this technique. So when the detection gets to a stage where it is only firing true positives, I would create a playbook for our SOC, so when it alerts again, they will know how to contain, eradicate, and recover against this technique. So then, to summarise my experience using the MITRE ATTCK framework, I think it's been a great experience, as it has sped up my hunting. It's allowed me to plan out what I should be hunting for, and by us mapping data sources to our tools, I know where to hunt to. As I am relatively new to the cybersecurity industry, it has increased my knowledge and skills in common attack types, and it's shown me how I can detect and prevent against certain techniques. Whilst I could stand here and list many benefits about using MITRE ATTCK, I think it's important for you to know how long it's taken me to get here. So our team did form about a year ago, and to gain an understanding of how each different detection works and how to detect them has probably taken me at least 4 to 6 months. I think it's important to try find the baseline data of your company, so that understanding any false positives and then adapting each technique to make sure that we have the best detection, monitoring and response available to these potential attacks. Thank you all for listening to my run through, and now I'll pass you back to Seth, who will mention a few final tips.
Cheers, Abby. Okay, so 3 is the magic number still. I've already said it. Add the technique number to your instant tickets. It helps you prioritise. It helps you understand which ones you need to look at more, automate, and get into a known true positive for the SOC to be able to respond to it. Prioritise the 20 techniques. So it was Katie Nichols from MITRE and Brian Bayer, I think it is, from Red Canary, did a talk back in January where they did the top 20 MITRE techniques they're seeing used in MITRE and in Red Canary. They were different because they've got different customers or different infrastructure, and they are different organisations. There were a few similarities, but they weren't necessarily at the same level within those top 20. So I just took that as a starter for 10, well, starter for 20 even, and focus in on those 20. It will really help you. Do not try and eat the whole whale in one go. Do not do all 217. Do not try and do it. We failed. You will fail. Narrow down to the top 20 and then keep those 20 up to date. As the business changes and the attacks change, reprioritise which techniques you're going to focus on more. Automate detection of the techniques. I get bored very easily. I don't want to do the same thing again and again and again. I want to look at new stuff all the time. Automate it. Get it into the SOC. If you can automate the protection, prevention, remediation, automate it. Just get it out of your hair. Don't redo stuff all the time. And those are kind of my 3 tips for the thing. Anything else? As Abby said, come and find us after the talk and we'll go through more. If you want any information, it's free. Go and have a look at ATT&CK. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions?
We're in the front row, aren't we?
Yeah, so you said you've got like a red team that you pass stuff off to their internal. How much are you worried about if they just test your existing hypothesis? That do you ever bring in like external red teamers to just sort of, without giving them any information about what you've done, you do an attack path and see if we detect it, or do you rely just on your internal team?
Yeah, so we use internal and external red teams. We also have some automated testing as well. So, yes, we do. Did nobody read it? No?
Just really quickly, do you ever like look into the sort of the unknown unknowns? So the sort of anomalies around, things that just a bit odd, a bit weird, something that's not along the norm. And how do, if you do, can you actually apply that to MITRE?
Absolutely. So MITRE isn't every technique that can be used. The point is if we're looking at as wide a range as possible of the MITRE techniques, these are the most common techniques. The APT groups out there, a lot of them, almost all of them, have been mapped into those techniques. They might use 0 days. They might use new techniques that have not been documented anywhere before. But at some point, they'll have to perform that tactic. And the chances are they might use a 0 day to get into your business, but then they'll live off the land. So we'll be looking at that activity that could be administrative or could be malicious. We're always trying to find them. We might not find them at the first stage, or we might not find them in the middle, but we should find something in there if we keep looking at the whole, as much of the attack framework, as many of the techniques as possible. Any more? No. Thank you very much. Cheers all.